The history of the Macintosh. The history of the Macintosh is one of the most popular computers in the computer industry. The Macintosh, or Mac as it is called, was the most revolutionary computer when it was launched in 1984. The inventor of the Mac was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is the founder of Apple, Incorporated, and changed the mobile and computer market for what it is today. Steve was born on February 24, 1955 in Los Angeles, California. When Steve was in high school, he worked during the summers at Hewlett-Packard. When he was working at Hewlett-Packard, he met his future business partner Steve Wozniak. The original Mac was first introduced on January 24, 1984 at the Flint Center at De Anza College in Cupertino, California. As Steve Jobs was at Reed College in Oregon, he studied a variety of subjects. He studied literature, poetry, physics, and more. He only stayed there for a semester, which then he stayed at his friend's house, where Apple says that is where he designed the typefaces for Macs. In 1983, Steve and his friend Steve Wozniak came up with the idea of creating the first personal computer. Steve worked together to invent the Apple I and Apple II. In 1984, after Apple released the first Mac, IBM came into popularity toward the first computer, both of them selling $1 billion in personal computers. The first major personal computer firm goes bankrupt. The total losses in 1983 combined profits of IBM and Apple. When the first Macintosh was released, it was the first mouse-driven computer that was successful. The Mac used an interactive interface that Steve got the idea from the Motorola 68000 microprocessor. At the time, in 1984, the price of the first Mac was $2,500. In today's money, that would be $5,837.24. The first Mac weighed 22 pounds. The applications that were pre-installed on the first Mac were Mac Paint, which uses the mouse, and MacWrite, which is used for word processing. After leaving Oregon and returned to California in 1974, Steve started to work for Atari, an early manufacturer of personal computers. Steve Wozniak was also working at Atari, that is, where both Steves teamed together to design games for the company. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were also hackers, and both of them designed a telephone blue box. The blue box was an electronic device that simulated a telephone operator's dialing console and provided the user with free phone calls. Jobs and Wozniak had learned enough to try their hand at building personal computers. Using Steve Jobs' family's garage as a base of operation, the team produced 50 fully assembled computers that were sold at local Mountain View electronics store called the Bike Shop. The sale encouraged the pair to found the Apple Incorporation on April 1st, 1979. The Apple Corporation was named after Steve Jobs' favorite fruit. The Apple logo was a representation of the fruit with a bite taken out of it. The bite represented a play on words, bite and bite. During the early 80s, Steve Jobs controlled the business side of the Apple Corporation and Steve Wozniak the design side. However, in 1984, a power struggle with the board of directors caused Steve Jobs to leave Apple. After things at Apple got a little rotten, Steve Jobs founded Next, a high-end computer company. Ironically, Apple bought Next in 1996, and Steve Jobs returned to Apple to serve once more as its CEO from 1997 until his retirement in 2011. The Next was an amazing workstation computer that sold poorly. The world's first web browser was created on Next, and technology in Next software was transferred to the Macintosh and the iPhone. In 1986, Steve Jobs bought the graphics group from Lucasfilm's computer graphics division for $10 million. The company was later renamed Pixar. At first, Steve Jobs intended the Pixar become a high-end graphics hardware developer, but the goal was not well achieved, and Pixar moved on to do what it does best: make animated films. Steve Jobs negotiated Pixar and Disney to collaborate on a number of animated films, including Toy Story. In 2006, Disney bought Pixar from Steve Jobs. After Steve Jobs returned to Apple as CEO in 1997, Apple computers had to redesign in products development with the iMac, iPod, iPhone, iPad, and much more. Before his death, Steve Jobs was listed as the inventor and co-inventor of 342 United States patents, with technologies ranging from computer and portable devices, user interfaces, speakers, keyboards, power adapters, staircases, clamps, sleeves, and packages. His last patent was issued for the Mac OS X docks user interface that was granted the day before his death. After Steve Jobs' death on October 5, 2011, Apple released Icloud, which is an online backup software built into Apple iPhones and on Macs. Find My Friends was introduced on October 12, 2011. The late 2012 MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air was released on June 11, 2012. The iPhone 4, 32 and 64GB version was released on September 12, 2012. The 8 and 16GB version was released on September 10, 2013. The famous Apple EarPods was released on September 12, 2012. The iMac 21.5-inch and 27-inch was released on November 30, 2012. The Mac Pro was released to the public on December 19, 2013. Apple thought of inventing a MacBook that was light and portable, and so the MacBook Air was invented and released on April 29, 2014. The current iMac, with a new design, was created and Apple announced it at one of their events on stage. A couple months later, Apple invented a new technology into their MacBooks. Retina displays. The public got to see for themselves how good the high-definition technology really is. At the beginning of summer 2015, Apple came up with a music service called Apple Music, which is a service you pay for to get music from selected artists. Apple Music is similar to other services like Spotify and Pandora, but it's directly built into the operating system of Apple. In the beginning of the fourth quarter of 2015, Apple came out with a new iPhone, the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. With every new iPhone, Apple upgrades what the last model didn't have or couldn't be fixed. The iPhone 6 is thinner and lighter than its brother, the iPhone 5, which in the fourth quarter of 2015, Apple made an iMac with a Retina 5K display. Now you have a larger screen pixel density, which means you have a crisper display. In April of 2016, Apple released a new version of their MacBook, which has a new keyboard technology. Since the laptop is so thin, Apple had to use butterfly keys, which only travel a few millimeters. On September 16, 2016, the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, and most importantly the first generation Apple Watch. The Apple Watch was a new way Apple could make something that could live on your wrist. The most current MacBook, the MacBook 2016, 13 and 15-inch, has a touch bar where the function keys are. This touch bar changes with the program that you are in. For example, if you were in Final Cut Pro, the touch bar would allow you to scrub through your video. The downfall of the 2016 MacBook is that it only has two USB-C ports, which can be used for display ports, external storage, mouse, and many more options. But you may need a couple adapters to convert USB-A to USB-C. Apple has come a long way from the beginning in 1984 to 2016. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak changed the mobile and computer industry drastically to what it is today, with a computer in your pocket and a lightweight, portable, and powerful laptop in your bag.